The sun burned down on Riverside Estates, a gated community so perfectly trimmed it looked like it had something to hide. I eased my blue Ford into a visitor space beside the clubhouse, engine off, mirrors folded, routine. Then the silence cracked. One horn. Then another. The kind of blast that comes from entitlement, not emergency. I glanced up and saw her. HOA Karen, hot pink tracksuit, mirrored sunglasses, arms slicing the air like she was directing traffic in her own kingdom. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. Because what's about to happen isn't just a parking dispute, it's a full-scale exposure of power gone rotten. She stomped toward me, silver BMW idling behind her in the lane, hazard lights blinking like a warning beacon. "That's my spot," she shrieked. Her voice carried the weight of someone who's never been told no. I kept both hands on the wheel, calm, deliberate. Years in federal service taught me that silence is its own weapon. She slapped her palm against my window, sharp, echoing, then motioned for me to roll it down. "Ma'am," I said evenly, lowering the glass halfway. "Visitor spaces aren't assigned." Her expression twisted. "You people think rules don't apply to you." I almost smiled. "You people." I'd heard that tone before, usually right before someone made a very bad legal mistake. She leaned in, perfume cloud thick as smoke. "I'm the vice chair of this HOA. That spot's reserved for board members." I turned my eyes toward the faded white stencil on the pavement. The word visitor stared back at her. "Doesn't seem like it," I replied. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a second, the silence between us felt like the split second before an engine backfires. Then she laughed, too loud, too forced, and said, "Fine. If you want trouble, you've got it." She spun on her heels, phone already out. I could hear snippets. "Violation. Trespassing. He's threatening me." I sat still, engine off, seatbelt fastened, nothing to dispute. Across the lot, sprinklers hissed, birds darted, an old couple paused mid-walk to watch. HOA Karen loved an audience. When I finally stepped out, every move was measured. Military posture, calm breathing, no aggression. "Ma'am," I said, "this isn't personal. You're blocking the lane. Someone could get hurt." She scoffed. "You're not a resident, are you?" "Lot 23B, I answered. "Bought it last year." That caught her off guard. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my badge clipped to the dashboard. Department of Defense RET. Suddenly her bravado flickered. But arrogance dies slow. "I'll have your car towed," she hissed. "By which contractor?" I asked. "Because the HOA's current towing agreement expired last quarter. I read the minutes." Her mouth opened again. Nothing came out. She wasn't used to someone who read bylaws for breakfast. Within minutes, she was back in her BMW, phone pressed to her ear. I heard fragments. "Call Rick. Same truck as last time. Make it fast. A tow truck. Perfect." I leaned against my fender, sun glaring off the windshield, and waited. Neighbors gathered at safe distances, some filming, some whispering. Everyone knew HOA Karen's theatrics, but nobody ever challenged her. Until now. 10 minutes later, the rumble of diesel broke the heat haze. A red and white truck rolled in, yellow lights strobing. Metro Tow. The same company that appears in every complaint filed against the HOA. I'd checked the names earlier this week. Its owner shared Karen's last name. Nephew. Figures. The driver stepped out. A big man in coveralls. "Which vehicle?" he asked. Karen pointed at me like she was ordering a strike. "That one. He's in violation." The driver frowned. "Visitor space?" "Don't question me. I'm HOA management." I stepped forward, credentials calm in my hand. Proof of ownership, current registration, time-stamped video from my dash cam showing my legal park. "You'll want to review these before hooking anything," I said quietly. "Unlawful tow on private property without verified authorization violates State Statute 46-5-112. Civil penalty, $5,000 per occurrence." His eyes shifted between us. Karen started shouting again, voice cracking now. "You can't pull that military stuff here." I met her gaze. "It's not military stuff, it's the law." For a heartbeat, everything froze. The truck idling, heat shimmering off chrome, the crowd holding its breath. Then the driver shrugged. "Ma'am, I'm not touching that car." He climbed back into his cab. Karen's jaw dropped. "You'll regret this," she screamed. "Already don't," I said, sliding behind the wheel. She pounded once on my hood, an echo of frustration, and stormed off toward the clubhouse, phone to her ear again, searching for someone else to back her up. I watched her reflection fade in the rearview mirror and felt that old, familiar calm settle in. This wasn't over. I'd seen enough corruption wrapped in authority to know where it leads. And as the diesel engine of the retreating tow truck faded into distance, I whispered to myself the same line I used on deployment when arrogance tried to outrank law. Timing is everything. I didn't buy into Riverside Estates for prestige. I bought it for silence. After 20 years chasing fraud inside federal contracting, I wanted somewhere my pulse could slow. The irony? The place I chose for peace was ruled by people who treated power like oxygen. Before I retired, my badge carried weight. Department of Defense, Office of Inspector General. My job was to audit projects worth hundreds of millions, to spot the numbers that didn't add up. You spend long enough in that world, you learn that greed wears every kind of face, corporate, political, even suburban. I'd seen CEOs crumble when a single spreadsheet caught fire under scrutiny. I thought I'd left that behind when I bought a 2-story brick house with a porch facing the lake. I was wrong. The HOA here was its own small government. Monthly meetings, mandatory fees, rules about mailbox colors. Fine, order is good until someone like HOA Karen steps into power. She wasn't elected, she maneuvered. Her last name sat on every committee roster like a watermark. Her brother ran landscaping, her nephew ran towing. Her influence ran unchecked because no one had the time or nerve to challenge it. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. Because you'd be surprised how fast a quiet neighborhood can turn into a battlefield when one person decides the rules belong to them alone. The first time Karen crossed my radar, it wasn't even personal. A letter appeared in my mailbox. Violation. Lawn exceeds HOA height requirement by 2 inches. It was absurd. I measured it myself, 3 inches under the limit. But I didn't fight it. I paid the fine. Let her think she'd won. You don't challenge power before you know its structure. Weeks later came the next notice. Unapproved mailbox design. The same mailbox the HOA had approved the year before under the previous board. Then another letter. Vehicle parked facing wrong direction. That's when I started collecting everything. Dates, signatures, return addresses. Patterns emerge fast when you've trained to follow money trails. I pulled public filings. Riverside Estates HOA, Incourse, was registered as a non-profit domestic corporation. President, Mark Delaney. Vice Chair, Karen Holt. Treasurer, vacant. The same vacant line appeared 3 years running. Missing treasurers are red flags. No oversight, no financial transparency. I dug deeper and found that HOA Karen had been submitting expense reimbursements for consulting services. Thousands of dollars paid to a towing company, Metro Tow Services LLC, her nephew's business. Every illegally parked car, every fine, funneled profit right back to her bloodline. I documented all of it. You don't survive federal investigations without knowing the value of timestamps. I used the same structure I used on defense cases. One binder for correspondence, one for financials, one for statutory alignment. By the time most people realize they're being conned, the paper trail's already gone. I made sure it couldn't vanish. Neighbors started coming to me quietly. Mrs. Reynolds from Lot 5, ticketed twice for a cracked driveway that wasn't even hers. The HOA's property line survey had been doctored. The Sandersons, fined for holiday decorations exceeding lumen limits. A single string of white LEDs. HOA. Karen's grip was fear disguised as order. I began attending the board meetings. Not to talk, to listen. Karen ran them like cross-examinations. Anyone who objected was labeled disruptive. The secretary took minutes, but those minutes never appeared on the official website. I checked. It wasn't mismanagement. It was control. During one meeting, Karen mentioned her nephew's towing company like it was a public service. "We keep order around here," she said, smiling at the room. I made note of her phrasing. Order. Always the word tyrants used before chaos. After that, I visited the county recorder's office. The HOA's towing contract wasn't on file, required by law but missing. That's when the switch flipped. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. This was an unregistered for-profit operation masquerading as compliance. You learn to recognize thresholds, the moment something stops being annoying and starts being criminal. This was it. I drafted a quiet report for myself, 47 pages, cross-referenced with property law, state codes, and HOA governance statutes. I didn't send it anywhere yet. Patience wins wars. Still, word spread that I'd been digging. Karen didn't like that. She started a whisper campaign. "He's military, paranoid, thinks everyone's corrupt." Neighbors started avoiding me at the mailbox. Didn't matter. I'd played this long game before. Every time a new regulation hit, a rule about fence height, a new parking ban, a noise curfew that only applied to some, I filed it away. Each abuse had a timestamp. Each timestamp had a pattern. But I wasn't just watching Karen. I was watching the system that enabled her. The president, Mark Delaney, who never showed up in person, only sent pre-signed letters. The secretary, who worked at Karen's favorite salon. The maintenance contractor, another relative. It was an empire built on paper, and I'd seen empires crumble for less. One night, I laid it all out on my kitchen table. Folders open, highlighter ink bleeding through. The same heat that had filled the parking lot that afternoon now hummed through my veins. The difference was, I had leverage. In the federal world, power comes from process. You don't shout, you don't fight. You build the wall of evidence so high that no one can climb over it. By morning, I had everything categorized. HOA charter violations, financial discrepancies, evidence of conflicts of interest. I knew exactly how to move. I filed a quiet request for financial disclosure, perfectly legal under state HOA transparency statutes. Karen ignored it. Then I filed another, this time certified mail. That one forced her to respond. She sent a 2-line letter. Records unavailable at this time. That's the bureaucratic equivalent of a confession. Next, I visited the county attorney's public access office, asked for every complaint ever filed against Riverside Estates HOA, 7 pages of them, most unresolved, several mentioning the same towing company. That's when I understood. Karen wasn't just abusing authority. She was using the HOA as her personal funnel. Fines, in, cash out, all under the banner of community standards. But the real trigger wasn't money. It was ego. People like her can't resist being right, even when they're wrong. And that's what would undo her. The next time she came after me, it wouldn't be about grass height or mailbox color. It would be something public, something she could flaunt. I just had to let her pick the battlefield. So when she screamed, "That's my spot," in the parking lot that day, she thought it was another show of power. She didn't realize she'd just stepped into her own audit. I watched the sunset that night from my porch, the lake surface still, the reflection of trimmed lawns and picture-perfect order. Every rule here looked beautiful on the outside, until you looked at who enforced it. And when you've spent your career tearing down corrupt systems, there's one thing you learn. They always underestimate the man who doesn't flinch. By the third month of living in Riverside Estates, the facade started cracking. From the outside, the neighborhood looked like a brochure: identical homes, synchronized sprinklers, flags fluttering in perfect symmetry. But beneath the manicured hedges, the HOA ran like a shadow government, and HOA Karen was its loud, unelected dictator. She thrived on control. Every rule, every letter, every dollar filtered through her. Officially, she was vice chair. In reality, she ran the show. The HOA president, Mark Delaney, a corporate attorney from downtown, was nothing more than a signature. The treasurer slot remained temporarily vacant, which meant every checkbook belonged to Karen. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now, because this is where the story stops being neighborhood drama and turns into a masterclass in manipulation. Karen's reign began 3 years earlier after the previous board resigned en masse. She positioned herself as the only one willing to keep things organized. Residents thanked her, at first. She smiled at the cameras, quoted bylaws during block parties, and promised accountability. But power and praise fermented into entitlement. Within months, she'd transformed the HOA into her personal ATM. She controlled which residents got citations, which contractors got paid, and which violations were forgiven, mostly for friends and loyalists. People who challenged her found themselves targeted by obscure rules: fence paint colors, patio furniture, unauthorized decorations. She called it maintaining standards. Everyone else called it survival. Her network wasn't accidental. Her nephew, Rick Holt, ran the towing company used by the HOA, Metro Tow Services, LLC. Her brother-in-law owned the landscaping firm that handled mandatory maintenance. Both were listed as preferred partners in the HOA manual. She even had Officer Linda Briggs, the part-time security patrol supervisor, wrapped around her influence. Not corrupt, just worn down, tired of dealing with her daily tirades. Every Sunday, Karen would host what she called pre-meetings at her house: wine, gossip, and strategy. No minutes, no witnesses, no transparency. By Monday morning, those discussions magically turned into board decisions. New fines, new restrictions, new contracts. I watched it all unfold like a field operation. I'd sit quietly in the back row of the HOA hall, notebook in hand, jotting everything: body language, alliances, inconsistencies. Karen ruled through noise, overwhelmed them, out-talk them, make them feel smaller. She'd weaponize embarrassment like policy. Once, an elderly man named Harold Jenkins, a Vietnam vet, soft-spoken, stood during open comments and said he couldn't afford his new $400 tree trimming fine. Karen smiled sweetly and said, "Then maybe it's time to move somewhere less demanding." The room went silent. She loved silence. It made her feel invincible, but arrogance creates leaks. In the minutes she published, Karen inflated attendance numbers, edited out objections, and signed them as unanimously approved. When I compared copies residents had kept privately, the lies were blatant. Whole paragraphs vanished, especially the ones mentioning financials. Her manipulation didn't end at money. She used fear as currency. Every story I heard had the same pattern: a family defying her, a sudden inspection, a fine that escalated until the threat of lien or towing followed. And always, The same phrase in her letters. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. It sounded official, because she made it sound like law. But what she didn't know was that I'd already mapped every one of her tactics against the state Homeownerassociation Act. Half her citations had no legal foundation. She'd misused Section 3.2b, which governs parking enforcement, applying it to streets the HOA didn't even own. That was more than arrogance. That was fraud. Still, she operated like she couldn't be touched. She wore her HOA badge like a sheriff's star and strutted through board meetings with her gold pen poised like a gavel. When residents questioned her spending, she'd flash fake outrage and drown them in procedural jargon. Motion to table, point of order, in violation of subsection 4. She spoke fluent confusion. I saw the board fracture one member at a time. The secretary resigned quietly after being accused of insubordination. The maintenance officer stopped attending meetings. The HOA attorney started replying only through formal letters, never direct calls. Karen didn't notice the isolation. She mistook fear for loyalty. Behind closed doors, her corruption went deeper than HOA letters. Through county records, I discovered that Karen's name appeared on the Metro Tow Services business license as an operational consultant. A quiet back end, profit line. She was billing the HOA for incident response fees, for every vehicle her nephew's company removed, even her own neighbor's cars. I knew where this was headed. People like Karen build towers out of paperwork, believing that if they bury their crimes in enough documents, they'll never be found. But she forgot the one thing paperwork can't protect against, someone who actually reads it. So I started connecting threads. Every fake citation, every fabricated meeting, every invoice routed through her nephew's LLC. It all formed a web, one she thought nobody would see. And the residents, good people worn down by fear, began to whisper. They'd stop me at the mailbox or on late walks by the lake. "You used to work for the government, right?" they'd ask quietly. "Could you look at something for me?" I'd nod. They'd hand me letters, red-stamped fines, copied receipts. Each document became another puzzle piece. Karen noticed the shift. Her eyes would flicker to me during meetings, that smile tightening just a bit more each time. She sensed the tide changing but couldn't admit it. Ego doesn't allow retreat. One evening, I saw her pacing in front of the clubhouse, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp enough to cut through the humid air. "If he thinks he can audit me, he's mistaken." She turned, noticed me, and pretended to wave casually. But her hand trembled. She started holding closed sessions. No residents, no notes. Illegal under state HOA law. I submitted a written request for transparency. She ignored it. That's when I looped in the county compliance office. Quietly, formally. No drama. Just documentation. Days later, she slipped up. At the next public meeting, she bragged about hiring Metro Tow under an exclusive HOA contract, unaware that I'd already confirmed that contract expired months prior. Cameras recorded everything. Her own arrogance built my evidence. She ended the meeting with her favorite phrase, "I will not be challenged on this matter." But she already had been. That night, I spread every document across my table. The pattern was complete. Unauthorized towing contracts, financial kickbacks, falsified votes, and selective enforcement violations. It wasn't just unethical. It was criminal negligence and potential RICO exposure. She had built her empire on paperwork and intimidation, but I'd spent a lifetime dismantling exactly that kind of empire. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. I just had to wait for the right trigger. It would come soon, maybe the next time she called for a tow, or the next time she tried to publicly humiliate someone. And when it did, everything she'd built would fold under its own weight. HOA Karen ruled Riverside Estates like she was untouchable. But she was about to learn that in the real world, especially the federal one, no one is above documentation. The next morning, I turned my kitchen into a war room. Laptop, folders, legal pads, the same setup I'd used years ago to audit multi-million-dollar defense contracts. The difference now was scale. The corruption was smaller, pettier, but no less deliberate. And the same rule applied. Follow the paper, not the noise. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now, because what I'm about to uncover would shake the illusion of every perfect neighborhood you've ever seen. The first step was mapping authority. HOAs exist under state statute, but their enforcement depends on deed covenants. I pulled my closing documents, everything from title insurance to plat maps. Buried in the fine print was the HOA's governing clause, signed 15 years ago by the original developer. It gave the board power to enforce parking and landscaping consistent with local ordinances. The key phrase was consistent with. Karen's policies weren't. She had invented her own system, claiming authority the state never granted. I compiled every parking notice, scanned the codes, and aligned them with the State Uniform Homeownerassociation Act, Title 47, Chapter 32. Section 4212 required 2 board votes and a written record before towing could occur. There were none. Section 4215 prohibited self-dealing between board members and service providers. She'd signed those invoices herself. Evidence is only as strong as verification, so I started filing Freedom of Information requests with the county recorder and transportation office. I wanted the original permit for Metro tow services. The response came 3 days later. License active but missing insurance renewal for the past fiscal year. In simple terms, Karen's towing company was operating illegally. Next, I called the State Consumer Protection Division. The investigator on duty, a calm voice named Teresa, confirmed that multiple residents had filed towing complaints linked to the same company. "We've been waiting for solid documentation," she said. I told her she'd have it by Friday. That night, I stayed up until dawn organizing the evidence chain. Each PDF, each photo, each receipt cataloged chronologically, signed, dated, and stored on encrypted drives. Old habits die hard. Chain of custody matters even when the battlefield is asphalt instead of sand. By morning, I had a 90-page dossier. Front page, Riverside Estates HOA, preliminary evidence of conflict of interest and statutory violations. I printed 2 copies, one for the state, one for backup. While the printer hummed, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered. "This is Karen Holt, Vice Chair of Riverside Estates HOA, she snapped. "I know who you are." "I've been informed you're distributing false information about board operations. That's defamation." I let the silence stretch. Then, evenly, "Truth isn't defamation, ma'am, but misuse of authority is." She hung up. I emailed the dossier to the State Attorney General's Office, Division of Civil Oversight, with a short cover note. Possible violations under HOA Governance Act, Paragraph 42215, conflict of interest, potential fraudulent billing involving Metro Tow Services, LLC, requesting review for RICO threshold. Within hours, I received acknowledgement and a case number. Bureaucratic language, but it meant the machine was now moving. The next 48 hours turned into surveillance. I wasn't tailing people, I was tailing patterns. Karen's emails to residents became increasingly frantic. New restrictions, urgent special assessments, sudden maintenance emergencies. Classic diversion. Create noise so nobody asks about the money. Meanwhile, the Attorney General's field office requested physical verification. They wanted proof of altered minutes and any direct payment trail. I called an old contact, Captain David Reese, a compliance officer still active in the reserves. We'd served together years ago in Kabul auditing reconstruction funds. I told him briefly what I was working on. He laughed. HOA corruption? That's peacetime combat, brother. Document everything and keep it clean. That evening, I walked the neighborhood under sodium lights, recording footage of the tow-away signs. Half were installed without county permits. Some were even missing required reflective coating. Every frame another violation. Back home, I overlaid the footage on the plat map. A pattern formed. The restricted zones matched properties owned by residents who'd challenged Karen publicly. Coincidence doesn't map that perfectly. This was targeted punishment disguised as regulation. The next morning, a black SUV idled near my driveway. Same make and color as Karen's nephew's truck. It rolled away when I stepped outside. Nothing illegal, just intimidation. I noted the plate, took a photo, time-stamped it. Evidence doesn't flinch. By midweek, I had enough for escalation. I drafted a memorandum of findings. Count I, unauthorized towing operations under unrenewed state license. Count 2, falsified HOA meeting minutes, breach of paragraph 211. Count 3, self-dealing financial transactions violating non-profit fiduciary duty. Count 4, pattern of retaliatory enforcement indicating harassment under Local Ordinance 1294. The tone was clinical, the way federal reports always are. Facts don't need volume to hit hard. 2 days later, I received an encrypted email from the AG's office confirming referral to State Enforcement Task Force for preliminary action. They'd coordinate with County Compliance and Consumer Protection. That's 3 agencies, the trifecta. Karen must have sensed it. She called another emergency board meeting, this one closed to non-members. Residents protested at the door. I stayed home. No need to attend when the state had already joined the conversation. Later that night, Linda, the security officer, stopped by. She looked uneasy. "You didn't hear this from me," she said, "but Karen ordered the towing company to clear vehicles from visitor spots starting tomorrow. Claims it's for repaving." "Repaving?" I asked. "Yeah. No permit filed, no work order. She just wants the lot empty." That was her panic move. Erase the scene. Hide the evidence. I opened my laptop and filed an injunction request through the county portal, citing imminent violation of property rights. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it froze the action until review. By morning, a temporary hold appeared in the HOA records. Karen's mass tow plan died before sunrise. The next 72 hours became a quiet avalanche. The Consumer Protection Division sent official inquiries to Metro Tow. The company stalled. The county auditor scheduled an inspection of HOA financials. The AG's office requested my raw files. Bureaucracy at its best, slow, steady, irreversible. I started hearing the whispers again, but this time they carried hope. Residents who had avoided me were suddenly knocking on my door, handing me their copies of fines, emails, and letters. Some cried. One man, a retired firefighter, said, "We thought nobody could stop her." I told him softly, nobody needed to. She stopped herself. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She printed flyers accusing me of cyber harassment and illegal recording. She dropped them in mailboxes. It backfired. People saw desperation for what it was. Then came the tipping point. A certified letter arrived from the Office of Civil Oversight confirming that a formal investigation into Riverside Estates HOA had begun under case Corv 22-311 Salbam. That's the bureaucratic equivalent of a thunderclap. Once that number exists, you can't bury it. I didn't celebrate, not yet. Investigations take time, and Karen still had reach. But for the first time, the battlefield tilted. That weekend I met with Captain Reese over coffee downtown. I slid the folder across the table. He skimmed the pages, nodding. "You did everything right," he said. "Chain of evidence, clear statutory citations. If she touches another car, she's finished. I leaned back. She will. She can't help herself. He smiled knowingly. Then you'll have your proof in real time. 2 days later, that prediction landed with perfect accuracy in the sound of a diesel engine and a hot pink tracksuit screaming across asphalt. But that moment belongs to the confrontation. For now, the groundwork was laid. Every statute, every regulation, every hidden document stacked quietly behind me like ordnance waiting for detonation. The kind of detonation that doesn't make noise, it makes consequences. When people ask how corruption collapses, they expect explosions. In truth, it happens like this. One piece of paper at a time until the weight becomes unbearable. And HOA, Karen was about to learn that the same bureaucracy she weaponized against her. Neighbors could turn on her faster than any tow truck she ever called. By the time the first week of the state investigation hit, Riverside Estates felt like a kettle left too long on the stove. The lawns were still perfect, the sidewalks swept, but you could feel the pressure humming under the surface. Karen tried to act unbothered. She strutted past neighbors like nothing had changed, pretending not to notice the whispers trailing behind her. But the silence that used to mean fear had shifted into anticipation. People were waiting for something, and so was I. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. Because what happened next wasn't a confrontation, it was a full-scale exposure, the kind that strips power down to its weakest form. Panic. The HOA announced an emergency meeting on a Thursday evening. The flyer slid into every mailbox with the same hollow tone Karen used when she felt cornered, urgent, defensive, and desperate to reclaim authority. The topic line read, "Unauthorized activities by resident of Lot 23B." That was me. She didn't even bother disguising it anymore. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed before the meeting started. Neighbors who hadn't attended an HOA gathering in years filled the rows of folding chairs. Phones were out, cameras ready. Everyone knew this wasn't about bylaws. This was about control. Karen stood at the front, shoulders squared, voice tight from rehearsing. "We have a serious matter to address," she began. "A resident has been distributing misinformation to state agencies, causing unnecessary panic in our community." Her eyes locked on me like crosshairs. I didn't move. She continued, "These false reports could jeopardize our neighborhood's reputation and property values. We will not tolerate slander against this board." The irony almost made me laugh. I'd heard this speech before. Different stage, different villain, same pattern. When corruption feels exposed, it doesn't apologize. It performs. I waited until she finished her monologue. The room stayed silent. You could feel it. The collective fatigue. The quiet disgust. I rose slowly, paper folder in hand. "Madam Vice Chair," I said, my tone calm, practiced. "Would you like me to read the official case number from the State Attorney General's office so the community knows what's actually being investigated?" Her face twitched. She tried to interrupt, but I spoke over her, not loudly, just firmly enough to cut through the air. Case 22-311 Sci-V, open and active. The focus of the investigation is this board's financial practices and towing agreements. Not residents, not lawn heights, the board. The words landed like a gavel. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's painted smile cracked into a snarl. "You don't have the authority to—" "Actually," I said, "under state transparency law, any resident has the right to request records and disclose wrongdoing to regulatory agencies. And since you used HOA funds for towing contracts involving your own family, that's not an allegation. It's a conflict of interest." Her composure snapped. "You're lying!" she screamed, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The secretary, seated beside her, shifted uncomfortably and looked away. I pulled a single sheet from the folder and laid it on the podium. This is your nephew's business registration. Same last name, same address as your listed residence. The payments you signed off on went directly into his account. If you'd like, I can read the transaction IDs aloud. The room erupted in whispers. Karen slammed her palm on the podium, shouting for order, but nobody listened anymore. One of the residents, an elderly woman named Diane, stood up trembling. "You fined me $200 last year for my fence color," she said. "Then your nephew's truck towed my car when I came to pay in person. You said it was an accident." Her voice broke. "You made me cry in front of my grandkids." Karen glared at her, trying to conjure that same authority she'd used for years, but it was gone. Authority only works when people still believe in it. I let the silence stretch until it felt like gravity itself was pressing down. Then I said quietly, "You abused your power, and you did it in writing." Her breathing turned shallow. She started pacing, muttering about defamation and legal counsel. I'd seen this phase before, self-justification collapsing into chaos. The rest of the board members looked at the floor. One by one, they began sliding away from her side of the table, like soldiers abandoning a lost command. The crowd's energy shifted, relief mixing with outrage. Then, without warning, Karen pointed directly at me. "You set me up," she shrieked. "You planted this! You've been conspiring!" I stayed still. "No, ma'am," I said. "You built this. I just turned on the light." She lunged for her phone, barking into it. "Rick, bring the truck, now!" Her voice echoed through the hall. That name caught everyone's attention. "You're calling your nephew again," someone in the back shouted. "You're going to tow another car?" Karen ignored them, storming toward the door, phone still to her ear. I followed at a distance, not out of fear, out of instinct. I knew what was about to happen. The same escalation she'd used to intimidate others was about to collapse under scrutiny. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the clubhouse, leaving a haze of orange across the asphalt. Karen stood near her BMW, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. "I don't care, just get here," she hissed. A few residents had followed, recording quietly. 5 minutes later, the low rumble of a diesel engine rolled into the lot. The red and white Metro tow truck turned the corner, lights flashing. Perfect timing. Rick climbed down from the cab, looking uneasy, when he saw the crowd. "Aunt Karen?" he asked. She pointed at my Ford truck, her voice cracking. "Tow it, now, he's in violation." Rick hesitated. "It's in a visitor space." "I said tow it," she barked. "I'm the HOA authority here." That's when Linda, the part-time security officer, stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, holding her phone. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "I just received a notice from the state compliance office. There's an open investigation into HOA towing practices. Any action tonight could be considered interference." Karen froze mid-step. Her nephew looked between us, realizing too late that the tow order wasn't about a car. It was about control. I stepped closer, voice steady. "Rick, under Statute 46-5112, performing a tow without lawful authorization during an active state investigation could result in suspension of your license." His face paled. "I'm not doing this," he muttered, retreating toward his cab. Karen screamed after him, "You coward! Don't you dare leave me!" He didn't respond. The crowd began whispering again, phones raised, flashes catching the shine off her BMW. For the first time, Karen looked small, her voice straining, posture shrinking. "You can't do this to me," she said, almost pleading. "I built this neighborhood." I shook my head. "You built a system of fear, but it's over." The tow truck engine rumbled to life and backed away, its lights fading into the dusk. That's when the local news van turned the corner. Someone had called them. Maybe Diane. Maybe Linda. Didn't matter. The cameras rolled as Karen stood trembling beside her BMW, trying to hold on to whatever dignity she had left. The reporter, a young woman with sharp eyes and a microphone in hand, approached her first. "Ma'am, residents claim you've been abusing HOA power. Do you have any comment?" Karen blinked rapidly, words spilling out too fast. "This is harassment. Lies. I've served this community for years." The reporter turned to me. "Sir, are you the resident who filed the state complaint?" I nodded once. "Just doing what the law allows." That line ran on every local station that night. The next morning, the footage went viral in the community Facebook group. The clip showed Karen shouting, her nephew retreating, and me standing still, calm, hands folded. The comments were brutal. "About time someone stopped her. She's been terrorizing us for years. Karma looks good in uniform." By noon, the HOA board's email inbox overflowed with resignation notices. 3 members stepped down immediately. The president, Delaney, sent a single-line statement. "Effective immediately, I resign my position as HOA chair. No signature, no explanation, just surrender." Karen tried one last defense. She sent a community-wide email claiming she'd been framed by outsiders. She accused me of hacking HOA records, of coordinating with hostile agencies. But by then, no one believed her. The state's official press release landed that same afternoon, confirming an active investigation into Riverside Estates Homeowners Association and its leadership for potential misuse of funds and violation of statutory governance requirements. Her name was printed in bold. That evening, I stood on my porch watching the sunset burn over the lake. The same silence that once felt oppressive now felt earned. A few neighbors walked by and waved, the same ones who used to avoid eye contact. One of them, the retired firefighter, stopped at the fence and said, "You think she'll come back?" I looked toward the empty clubhouse. "She'll try, but next time she won't have the keys." The following day, Karen's BMW was gone. So was she. Rumor said she'd left town, staying with her sister 2 counties over. But her empire remained, hollow and rotting. The state investigators arrived the next morning, unmarked cars pulling up in the same visitor lot where it had all begun. Clipboards, badges, quiet authority. The kind that doesn't yell, it just documents. I didn't need to attend the interviews. My part was done. The truth was already in motion. But that night, as the headlines spread, one thought stayed with me. Corruption doesn't crumble in explosions. It collapses in silence, one verified fact at a time. Karen would spend weeks trying to rewrite the story, claiming bias, misunderstanding, even persecution. But the footage didn't lie, and neither did her own paperwork. And when she finally sat in front of the state investigator answering under oath, she wasn't vice chair anymore. She was just another citizen under scrutiny. And that's when the calm finally settled in. The same calm you feel when justice isn't loud. It's absolute. 3 days after the confrontation, Riverside Estates was quieter than I'd ever seen it. The clubhouse doors stayed locked. The usual patrol truck didn't roll through. The air felt lighter, like the entire neighborhood had finally exhaled. But peace doesn't arrive by luck. It arrives by process. And the process had only just begun. The official notice from the State Enforcement Task Force came folded neatly in my mailbox that morning. A plain envelope, no seal, no drama, just authority written in font so clinical it might as well have been engraved on steel. The letter confirmed the investigation had advanced to active enforcement. They were subpoenaing HOA bank statements, towing invoices, and communication logs. It also requested my cooperation as a primary witness. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now, because this is the part of the story where silence turns into evidence, and every lie finally finds its timestamp. I walked the document straight into my home office, scanned it, filed it by date, and called Captain Reese. He answered on the first ring. "They move fast when the FOA proof's airtight," he said. "You did half their job for them." I told him this wasn't about winning. It was about restoration. He paused. "You always were too measured for revenge." "Revenge is noisy," I said. "Accountability echoes longer." By noon, enforcement officers arrived in 2 unmarked sedans. They set up temporary workspace inside the clubhouse and began inventorying every file cabinet, every hard drive, every ledger. Residents gathered at a distance, watching like they were seeing sunlight touch a cave for the first time. For years they'd been told the HOA records were private. Now those same binders were being unboxed, labeled, and photographed. Karen's handwriting covered half of them. Notes in pink pen, signatures in looping cursive that screamed confidence. They meant nothing now. The state investigators documented every page, and with each one, another layer of her control peeled away. By evening, I was sitting across from 2 agents at my dining table. They wanted my original dossier, unedited. I handed it over. They asked if I'd be willing to provide a sworn statement. I didn't hesitate. Every fact was already verified. No speculation, no emotion, just timestamps and law. They thanked me and left quietly. Bureaucracy has no soundtrack, but its silence carries more finality than any verdict. The next morning, the first warrant dropped. Metro Tow Services was ordered to cease operations pending audit. Rick Holt's trucks were grounded, his business account frozen. His silence said more than any denial could. Karen's family pipeline had officially been cut. 2 days later, HOA bank records leaked through official channels. The numbers told the story perfectly. Tens of thousands in consulting reimbursements, monthly payments to community service vendors with no EINs, and checks written directly to Karen's name under the guise of administrative compensation. It was an old con dressed in neighborhood colors. When state auditors showed up at her home, she tried to invoke privacy laws. It didn't work. The warrant covered every document related to HOA finances. They walked out carrying boxes of files, flash drives, and a pink binder labeled Personal Notes, HOA Strategy. By Friday, the news stations parked outside the gates. Their headlines were predictable but accurate. Vice Chair of Riverside Estates HOA under state investigation for fraud, conflict of interest, and misuse of authority. Her name was trending statewide before sunset. I didn't gloat. Watching her collapse wasn't satisfying. It was inevitable. Power built on fear always ends that way. I spent the evening sitting on my porch, watching as neighbors gathered under the streetlights, talking freely for the first time in years. Some laughed softly. Some still looked stunned. But everyone felt it. The chokehold was gone. The following week, the HOA held a mandatory special meeting under state supervision. I attended. Front row. 2 agents flanked the back wall. The new interim chair, a local attorney named Paula Simmons, opened the session. "Effective immediately," she said. "Karen Holt and all associated board members are suspended pending formal adjudication. State auditors will oversee all administrative operations until a new election is held." No cheers, no jeers, just quiet acceptance. Even Karen's few allies kept their heads down. She sat near the front, visibly smaller than before. No makeup, hair pulled tight, paperwork clutched like a lifeline. When Paula finished, Karen tried to stand. "This is harassment," she said, voice breaking. "I've dedicated years to this community." Paula's tone stayed firm. "And you used that trust to violate the law. You're welcome to make a statement under counsel." Karen looked at me, eyes wide with something that wasn't rage anymore. It was recognition. The kind people have when they realize their enemy never shouted, never fought, just documented. She sat down slowly, lips trembling. After the meeting, reporters asked for comment. I kept it short. The system worked. It just needed proof. That quote made the evening headline. Over the next month, the enforcement wave spread. Metro Tow's offices were seized for financial review. The county attorney filed civil complaints naming both Karen and the dissolved board for breach of fiduciary duty. The state opened restitution channels for residents who'd been unlawfully fined or towed. Money started flowing back into the pockets it was stolen from. The irony was surgical. The same statutes Karen had twisted to punish others now outlined her penalties. Linda stopped by one afternoon, still in her security uniform. "They've subpoenaed her emails," she said. "Turns out she was coordinating those fines with her nephew in real time. She'd flag a car, text him, and collect a kickback once it was towed." I nodded. "They'll find everything," I said. "They always do once they start following data trails." A week later, a county marshal knocked on Karen's door with the official revocation notice. Her HOA membership privileges were suspended indefinitely. That meant no voting rights, no board eligibility, no access to community accounts. She'd gone from untouchable to persona non grata. Her BMW was gone, her driveway empty. The final report arrived in my inbox 2 weeks later. The subject line read, "Riverside Estates HOA, Enforcement Outcome Summary." It was clinical, precise, and devastating. The findings confirmed misappropriation of funds, unauthorized towing operations, and conflict of interest violations. The HOA's charter was dissolved and restructured under state supervision. Karen Holt was fined $72,000 in civil penalties, barred from serving on any board for 10 years, and referred for possible criminal prosecution pending tax review. I read it twice, then printed a copy and pinned it to my wall. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Systems can fail, but they can also be fixed. That weekend, I walked through the neighborhood at sunset. The same stretch of pavement where she'd screamed, "That's my spot," was now empty, clean, silent. Children rode bikes past the clubhouse without being shooed away. Neighbors nodded as I passed. For the first time, Riverside felt like a community instead of a kingdom. Linda joined me at the sidewalk edge, hands in her jacket pockets. "You know," she said, "it's funny. You didn't have to yell. You didn't even have to fight. You just made her own rules work against her." I smiled slightly. That's how laws are supposed to work. She kicked a pebble toward the curb. "They're saying you should run for HOA chair once it's reformed." "Not my style," I said. "I prefer the background. Easier to spot the rot that way." When she left, I stayed there a while, looking at the lake catching the reflection of streetlights. I thought about every resident who'd been fined unfairly, every veteran or widow or parent who'd paid out of fear. They all had something returned to them now. Not just money, but dignity. Karen tried to reach out once, through her attorney. A short letter asking if I'd consider providing a statement that she'd acted in good faith. I didn't respond. Good faith doesn't include fraud. Months passed, the investigation faded from the headlines, and Riverside moved on. New board, transparent budgets, public records posted online. The air stayed still and honest. But I never forgot what it took to get here. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in sirens, it arrives in signatures. When people asked later how I managed to dismantle the most corrupt HOA in the county without raising my voice, I gave them the same answer I'd used on every case that mattered. Documentation beats domination. And when they pressed, asking if I ever felt bad for her, I said no. Not because she lost, but because she never understood what she'd taken from others. Entitlement isn't about cars or parking spaces. It's about believing the rules exist only for everyone else. That belief ended the moment the first subpoena landed on her doorstep. And for the first time since moving here, I slept without my phone beside me. No alarms, no noise, just the clean silence of a place finally free from her shadow. It's strange how quickly chaos fades once accountability takes its place. A month after the enforcement notice, Riverside Estates no longer felt like a stage for conflict. The noise, the tension, the invisible chokehold of fear that used to hover over every conversation. It was gone. What remained was structure, clarity, and a kind of order that didn't need to shout to be respected. I woke up one morning to find the neighborhood transformed. The new HOA board had been sworn in, and the state-appointed auditor had finished her final review. The lawns were green. The air smelled clean after a night of rain. And for the first time since moving here, I didn't glance over my shoulder when I parked. The space where it all began, visitor spot 24B, was freshly striped, the pavement jet black from recent seal coating. The spot looked unremarkable, just another patch of asphalt. But to me, it was the symbol of everything that had shifted. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now, because this is how real victory looks. Not loud, not vengeful, just absolute. Karen Holt, once the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, was gone. Officially, she'd sold her home and left the county. Unofficially, word spread that she'd been forced to cover restitution fees from her personal savings after the board's insurance denied coverage for fraud. Her BMW was repossessed, her accounts flagged, and her name placed on a statewide HOA watch list. Every association in the region now had her file. It was poetic justice, her empire dismantled by the same paperwork she used to weaponize against everyone else. The new board, chaired by attorney Paula Simmons, operated under full transparency. Every meeting recorded, every vote published online, every dollar tracked. The bylaws that Karen had twisted beyond recognition were rewritten line by line with state oversight. For once, Riverside Estates ran like it should have all along, by the people who actually lived there, not the ones who wanted to rule it. The day the auditors packed up and left, Paula stopped by my porch. She handed me a folder. Inside was a framed letter of recognition from the State Attorney General's office, commending civilian cooperation in a matter of community governance integrity. It wasn't a medal, but it felt heavier than one. I thanked her, and she smiled. "You didn't just fix the HOA," she said. "You fixed the way people here see accountability." I walked her to the gate, and she paused, glancing toward the parking lot. "Funny," she said, "how one argument over a parking space could unravel years of corruption." I looked at spot 24B, sunlight reflecting off the blacktop. "That's how rot works," I said quietly. "All it needs is pressure in the right place." Later that week, I took a slow drive through the neighborhood. The same streets that once felt tense now looked almost peaceful. Children played basketball in driveways again. Neighbors waved without hesitation. People started planting flags again, not out of defiance but pride. You could feel it. The community had reclaimed itself. Every so often, I still saw traces of her. The old warning signs Karen had installed, tow zone, board-authorized vehicles only, had been taken down. But faint outlines of the lettering remained on the posts. Ghosts of control. Reminders of what happens when authority forgets it serves, not commands. That night, I sat by the lake behind my house. The reflection of porch lights shimmered across the water, broken occasionally by ripples from passing fish. I thought back to the first day I met her, the way she'd slammed her palm on my window, certain the world would bend because she demanded it. It hadn't bent. It had folded inward on her. Linda joined me halfway through the evening, still in uniform. She stood silently for a moment before saying, "You heard the latest? The county finalized her fines yesterday. Totals up to $92,000 with interest." I nodded slowly. Karma compounds faster than any loan. She laughed softly. "You could make a series out of this, HOA Karen Chronicles." I smiled. "No series, just one story, and it's finished." She looked toward the parking lot where the new tow signs gleamed under the lamplight. Official, regulated, legal. "You know," she said, "the new board voted to dedicate that visitor space in your name. They call it the Cross Standard. Said it's a reminder that documentation beats intimidation." I didn't know whether to laugh or shake my head. "They should have just painted it blue," I said. For irony, we both watched as a delivery truck parked briefly in that same space. The driver stepped out, checked his watch, smiled, and went inside without fear of being towed. It was such a small act, but it carried the weight of freedom, the kind that's invisible until you've lived without it. Weeks passed, the headlines faded, the state closed the case formally. No pending appeals, no loose ends. Karen's penalties were finalized, her license suspended, her influence erased. She didn't file an appeal. Maybe she finally understood that fighting a system built on truth was a battle she could never win. One morning, I opened the mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a parking lot somewhere in another county, a silver BMW on a tow truck, pink keychain dangling from the mirror. No note, just proof that karma travels. I smiled and slid it into my binder marked "Case Closed." By summer, Riverside had become what it was always supposed to be, a quiet, ordinary neighborhood. Not perfect, not sanitized, just human. When I walked past the clubhouse now, people stopped to talk instead of whispering. They'd ask how it felt to have won. I'd tell them I didn't win anything. "We all did," I'd say. "We just remembered that power belongs to everyone when it's written down and enforced right." On the anniversary of the confrontation, the new board held a small gathering near the clubhouse lawn. Nothing fancy. Coffee, folding chairs, sunlight reflecting off the lake. Paula gave a short speech about rebuilding trust. Linda thanked the residents for standing up. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. "I didn't do this alone," I said. "You all did it the moment you stopped being afraid. Corruption thrives on silence, but the moment you speak with proof instead of anger, it collapses." I looked at the crowd, neighbors who'd once kept their heads down now standing tall. "So if you ever forget how to stop someone like her, remember this: facts don't flinch." After the applause faded, I walked back to my car, the same Ford that started it all. I parked beside Space 24B for a moment, engine idling, window down. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and rain. Across the lot, a new sign hung on the wall, simple white letters on black metal. Community Integrity, established 2025. As I drove off, I caught one last glimpse in the rear-view mirror. The parking lot looked ordinary again. No chaos, no shouting, no flashing lights. Just stillness. But beneath that stillness was the weight of everything that had been corrected. People think justice is about punishment. It isn't. It's about balance, putting things back where they belong. And for the first time, Riverside Estates was finally balanced. Karma doesn't need to roar. Sometimes it just hums quietly, like a tow truck idling in the distance, waiting for the exact moment it's needed. That's how order returns. That's how stories end. Not in noise, but in proof. 6 months after the storm, the calm became permanent. The air around Riverside Estates felt lighter, almost unrecognizable. The same streets that once pulsed with fear now echoed with laughter, sprinklers, and the rhythmic hum of stability. The HOA meetings were public again. No closed sessions, no whispered agendas, no ambushes hidden under special business. The new board handled finances transparently, publishing every budget online. The residents had stopped fearing envelopes in their mailboxes. The silence that once meant intimidation now meant peace. I'd kept my distance since the reforms. My role was over. I wasn't interested in politics or power. I'd done my part and stepped back into the quiet anonymity I'd wanted all along. But the story never really left the neighborhood. People still whispered about the parking incident. It had become folklore, retold at block parties, referenced in HOA training seminars, cited in local newsletters. Some exaggerated the details, saying I'd predicted the tow truck's arrival or filed hundreds of pages of evidence single-handedly. They missed the truth entirely. None of it was about me. It was about how fragile false authority becomes when someone refuses to be intimidated. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now, because what comes next isn't a victory lap. It's what happens after the noise dies down, when justice quietly rebuilds its foundation brick by brick. One evening near the end of summer, I got a call from Paula Simmons, the new HOA chair. Her voice carried that blend of respect and exhaustion familiar to anyone who's tried to clean up someone else's mess. "Ethan," she said, "the state just closed the books. The audit's final." She paused. "They found more than we ever imagined." I listened silently as she listed numbers. Misused funds, personal accounts, backdated invoices, even hidden storage units rented under the HOA's name. "They recovered close to $120,000 in restitution," she said. "It's over. Completely over." Her voice cracked slightly. "We couldn't have done this without your groundwork." I told her the same thing I'd told the agents months earlier. Documentation is the only language corruption understands. She laughed softly, said thank you, and hung up. The line went dead, but the silence that followed felt like the first deep breath after holding one for too long. Days blurred into weeks. I resumed the routines I'd once abandoned. Morning runs, quiet coffee on the porch, late-night walks by the lake. The community looked different now, not because it had changed physically, but because people no longer moved like prey. There was no fear in their steps, no hesitation in their voices. They'd learned that accountability didn't have to come from outside. It could live here, among them, enforced by their own willingness to stand up. The most unexpected change came from Linda. She'd left mall security and taken a job with the county compliance division, partly inspired by what she'd witnessed. "Never thought I'd trade flashlights for paperwork," she joked when we crossed paths one morning. "Turns out catching real problems doesn't require a badge, just persistence." She grinned. "Besides, it pays better." As autumn settled in, a letter arrived from the Attorney General's office. Inside was the final disposition. The civil case against Karen Holt was resolved through full restitution and a 10-year injunction against any future position of fiduciary control. She wasn't in prison. Fraud at this level rarely leads there. But she was finished. Legally, financially, socially. Her name had become shorthand across multiple counties for the very thing she once accused others of: non-compliance. A local journalist reached out for an interview. I declined. "Let the documents speak," I told him. He laughed and said, "That's the most federal answer I've ever heard." He wasn't wrong. Silence and proof had carried me through my entire career. It was never about headlines. It was about permanence. Weeks later, I stopped by the clubhouse to return a few old HOA forms I'd kept during the investigation. Paula was there, sorting new binders, her desk organized with military precision. She smiled when she saw me, "We named the new document archive after you," she said. "The Cross Repository. It's where all community records are stored digitally now. No more lost files, no more edited minutes." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want my name attached to that?" She laughed. "It's not about ownership. It's about reminder. Why transparency matters." As I left, I noticed the new board's mission statement framed on the wall. Integrity isn't a rule, it's maintenance. Simple, true. I thought the story would end there. It didn't. One late evening, as rain started to fall in fine silver threads, I saw a car parked across the street. Headlights off, windows tinted. It wasn't unusual. Plenty of visitors came through. But when the door opened, and I saw the flash of a familiar hot pink umbrella, something inside me went still. HOA Karen. She looked older, worn down, makeup smudged by the drizzle. Her once perfect posture had collapsed into exhaustion. She crossed the street slowly, not storming this time, just moving like someone who'd lost the right to take up space. I stepped off the porch, staying in the glow of my floodlight. "Ethan," she said, voice soft, frayed. "I just wanted to talk." I didn't respond immediately. Her presence felt like the echo of a storm I'd already survived. She looked around the neighborhood. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, calm streets. "You fixed it," she said quietly. "They respect you now." "I didn't fix anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending rules don't apply to everyone." She nodded, rainwater dripping from her umbrella's edge. "They took everything," she said. "The house, the savings. Rick won't even return my calls." Her voice cracked. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, hate's too heavy to carry. I just stopped letting you steer." For a long moment she stood there in silence. Then she said, "You were right. About the paperwork. I thought power was about people listening. Turns out it's about being recorded." She laughed bitterly and walked back to her car. The pink umbrella bobbed into the darkness, swallowed by the rain. She didn't look back. I didn't follow. Some lessons don't need witnesses. When the rain stopped, I walked down to the parking lot. The asphalt glistened like black glass. The reflection of the lamplight shimmered across Space 24B, the same spot where everything started. A new sign stood beside it now. Community parking, fair use policy enforced. Nothing dramatic, just policy, clarity, and balance. The three things this place had lacked until it broke. The next morning, Paula called again. "She's gone," she said. "Moved out of state last night." Her voice was matter-of-fact, relieved. "I guess that's closure." "Closure's overrated," I replied. "What matters is the record." She laughed softly. Still the same old investigator. By winter, Riverside Estates had become a model for other communities. The state cited it as an example in training materials for HOA reform. Transparency meetings were live-streamed, budget reviews were mandatory. Other associations began reaching out for guidance, asking for templates. My inbox filled with requests from veterans, homeowners, and even lawyers looking for advice on how to handle their own Karens. I answered everyone with the same line: stay factual, stay calm, stay documented. The story traveled further than I ever expected, but I never capitalized on it, never turned it into a book or a podcast or a speech. Some victories belong only to the people who earned them quietly. One night, I took a drive beyond the gates, following the road until it merged with the highway. I passed towns and neighborhoods, each with their own rules, their own little governments, their own potential Karens waiting to surface. But I didn't feel cynicism. I felt clarity. Systems will always bend toward corruption, but they can be bent back by anyone willing to hold the line with proof instead of emotion. I pulled over at a rest stop, rain tapping lightly against the windshield. In the reflection, I saw the old federal ID badge I still kept tucked in the visor, its laminate worn, its lettering faded. I thought of every file, every law, every case that had ever crossed my desk, and how somehow a suburban HOA had taught me more about power than any agency ever had. People think heroes are built in battles. Sometimes they're built in parking lots. When I got home that night, the lake was still. The houses were dark, safe, ordinary. I stepped out of my truck, paused, and glanced once more at Space 24B. It was empty again, waiting for the next person who needed it. And for the first time, that thought didn't carry dread. It carried peace. The next morning, a small package arrived with no sender listed. Inside was a tow truck miniature. Metal, perfectly detailed, painted red and white. No note. Just a single word etched under the chassis. Timing. I set it on the edge of my desk beside the AG's letter, a quiet reminder of everything that had happened. Everything that could happen again if people ever forgot. Years from now, most of them will only remember the story as gossip, the day a woman in pink tried to claim a parking space and lost everything. But I'll remember the other version, the one written in silence, proof, and law. The version where accountability didn't roar, it just arrived on schedule. That's the real ending. Not her collapse, not my calm, just the stillness that follows when truth does what it's meant to do. The lake stays quiet. The streets stay orderly. And somewhere, far beyond Riverside Estates, a tow truck engine hums again, ready for the next call. Because karma doesn't sleep. It just waits for perfect timing.